So now I'm going to introduce the end-to-end process in TPGateway, which is going to be different from what the TPs are going through in IVF portal today. Okay, so this would be new for them, and they need to familiarize themselves with this new end-to-end process. Okay, so first of all, it all has to start with them having a profile within TPGateway. So it's similar to how when we shop at Lazada or Shopee, before we can even shop for anything, we have to create an account. So similarly, before the TPs can start to transact on TPGateway, they need to ensure that they have an active organization profile with IVF. Okay, so for existing TPs who are already transacting with IVF, their profiles will be migrated from IVF portal to TPGateway. So for this group of TPs, when they log into TPGateway on 10th of October, they will already have their profiles nicely set up for them. Okay, but if there are going to be new TPs that are looking to start transacting with IVF, then they may not have a profile on TPGateway yet because they have not transacted with IVF before. Therefore, for this group of TPs, they will then have to submit an organization registration, okay, so that they can, start transacting with IVF on TPGateway. So later on, we will also explain a bit more about this organization profile because TPGateway will be a portal that is used by many different agencies eventually. So although IVF is in a wave one of onboarding, currently the portal is already being used by SSG and WSG. So some of these TPs, they may have already have an account, like a profile with SSG, but they have not transacted with IVF yet. So then do they need to submit an organization profile? This will be touched on later on during the org registration section. Okay. And of course, after their profile is set up, they can also start to then submit new course applications. So for existing TPs, existing IVF TPs, if they already have an active organization profile with IVF, they can straight away start creating courses under IVF. Okay. All right, so once they submit the course, it will then be routed to TGS for the officers to then look through the organization, the course application of profiles, and then process them accordingly. So once this is being processed, okay, only then can the TP start to, conduct classes for their courses. Okay, so then they have to create this thing called course runs. Okay, so it is quite easy to kind of mix up course and course run. Okay, but to say very simply, right? So course is like a single kind of class, a topic that they want to conduct. So maybe introduction to marketing. Okay, this is a course that they want to conduct. So they need to come up with like what's the curriculum, etc. for this particular course. And then after IVF approves this course, introduction to marketing course, they can start to create multiple course runs for this course. So of course, for each course, they are not just looking at conducting it once, right? They will be conducting several different classes, maybe one on every Monday, one every Friday. So different course runs, okay, different classes. So each of this class, or we call it intake sometimes, they are called course runs. Okay, so only after the course is approved, they can start to add all these course runs that they have to indicate when is this class going to run from and which days are the sessions going to be held. Okay, so this is course runs. Okay, then after they have set up all these different classes, the TPs will then be able to use this thing called the grant calculator to just calculate what is the estimated amount of funding for the trainees. But this is an optional step. It's only they can use this if they are they want to find out what is the cost. So what's the amount of funding that the trainees can get? But they can actually skip this step and straight away enroll their learners into the course runs that they set up. Okay, so they will need to indicate which class is this trainee enrolled in, whether or not they are individual sponsored, employer sponsored, etc. Okay, and then after they have enrolled their students and then they start their course, they will then have to make sure that they take attendance for all their trainees. So attendance, there are two modes to take attendance. One is the digital mode, which is instant, and basically TPs don't need to do much. They don't need to manually check the attendance and all. And then the second method is the manual attendance, where they have to go and fill up like an Excel file and then upload it onto the system. So there's two modes which we will go through later, but it is mandatory for them to take attendance for their trainees. Okay. And then for courses, for IBF courses, I think all of them will have assessment. It's mandatory for IBF course to have assessment. So the TPs will then have to submit the assessment results for their courses after the course. Okay, and we do have a bulk upload function for them to reduce the processing time. Okay, so we'll talk about that later on as well. Okay, and then lastly, with all this being uploaded, there will be a system check. It's a automated system checks to actually check through, all the data that the TP submitted, starting from the enrollments records, the attendance, the assessments. Okay, so all these are automated. The officers doesn't have to go through every single record to check one by one to see if, whether or not they pass the attendance, they pass the assessments. So all this will be done digitally. Okay, and then once the system has confirmed that everything is in order and the TP submitted it within the submission deadlines, then what will happen is there will then be automated disbursements that is paid to the TPs via PayNow. Okay. But what happens if, let's say, the system check through and then it flags out some tasks, some review points for the officers to check through? Then such cases will then be flagged out, and there will be a task that is added to the officer's workspace, or sometimes we call it the to-do list, and officers can then pick up all these exceptional cases to then check through, and then to check whether or not this grant, should it be dispersed or should it be cancelled. So all these things will then require the officers to check before the grant can be actually released for disbursement. Okay, so all these officers' actions will be further covered in the training session, which will take place sometime in September. So for today, the focus will then be on the top portion, which is covering what the TPs would see. Okay, yeah. Okay, so the last thing that TPs can check will be the disbursements that they will get via PayNow. Okay, so today we will focus on the top part. I see some questions in the chat box, okay, but we will address them later on at the Q&A section. All right. Okay. So just to also highlight what are some of the key changes that TPs need to take note of with the go live at TPGateway. So first of all, it's a change in system. So this time, currently they are all transacting on IBF portal. Okay, but for any courses with a start date from 10th of October onwards, they will then have to log into TPGateway to actually submit all these transactions, like the course applications, the course runs, enrollment, attendance, assessments, etc. Okay. And then secondly, because they need to get access to TPGateway, then they will need to ensure that they get the correct COPPAS permissions before they can actually log into the portal. Okay, so we'll also run through what are some of the actions required from the TPs so that they can ensure that they get the correct COPPAS permission. Okay, and of course, the grant process in TPGateway is going to be different because we will be using course runs, enrollment, attendance, assessments, as well as fee collection status. These are actually the indicators that the system will be using to check whether or not a certain grant should be paid out or not. Okay, so there will be also submission deadlines that is tied to each of this transaction. Okay, so this will be touched on a lot later on towards the second part of today's session. So for example, for enrollments, TPs need to ensure that they submit it within 45 days or 105 days after the course start date. So for example, if the course is going to start on 1st of January, then it's a public course. If it's a public course run, then TP needs to ensure that the enrollment is submitted within 45 days, which means it's going to be maybe sometime in mid of February. They need to ensure all these trainee enrollments are submitted by then. So if they submit any of the enrollments after after the deadline, then the system actually wouldn't pick this enrollment up for to provide any grants. So even if a grant is being indicated in the enrollment record, the system eventually will not pick this up because it's considered as a late submission. Okay, so no grants will be paid out eventually. Okay. And then similarly for attendance and assessments, all this also have a deadline tagged to it, 45 days or 105 days, depending on whether it's a public or in-house course runs, but the deadline is tied to the course run end date. Okay. So need to be very careful of the deadline. For enrollment is tagged to the course run start date, whereas for attendance and assessment is tagged to the course run end date. But then the number of days is similar for all these three, whereby it's 45 days for public course runs and 105 days for in-house course runs. And lastly, there is also another field that they actually need to update within the enrollment record, and that is the fee collection status. So TPs need to make sure that they update their fee collection status to full payment made within 120 days after the course run end date. Okay? So this is one of the checker that the system will pick up. Okay, and if let's say the TP don't update this status, even if they had already uploaded the attendance assessments and they uploaded everything within the timeline, as long as this fee collection status is not updated to full payment made, the system won't actually pick this grant up for disbursement. Okay, so this is very important to note because some TPs may just leave this out thinking that they have already fulfilled the rest of the criteria. Okay. And lastly, to ensure that they can get their payments, then they actually need to make sure that they have a corporate pay now. And they also need to make sure this pay now account is being added to the organization tile on TPGateway. So this applies even for existing IBF TPs whose profiles are going to be migrated over to TPGateway. Okay, so upon their first login, one of the first thing that they should do is to go to the organization profile to actually update this detail so that they can get their disbursements on time. Okay, if they don't update this figure, then they won't be able to receive any disbursements from TPGateway.